Okay, Alexander, let's talk about this situation with John Kerry and the Iran foreign minister and Israel and strikes on Syria and a piece of a dialogue between the two gentlemen, allegedly a dialogue between the two gentlemen, which was buried way down in a New York Times article. Of course, all of this happened during the Obama era, but if true, it does expose John Kerry quite a bit. But, it wouldn't be the first time that John Kerry was making these types of backroom deals. I mean, I can think of speaking with ISIS guys in, I think it was at the UN, or speaking with people that were supporting IS in Syria at the UN, something along those lines. I mean, he's kind of got a history doing this. But anyway, the GOP is calling on him to resign now, and this is turning out to be quite a big controversy. What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we can say a few things. Kerry, of course, denies having said anything like this, and he denies it categorically. The problem he has is that the person that he was speaking to, who's Foreign Minister Zarif of Iran, has actually admitted that the conversation actually happened. This is a tape recording that's been released, which contains a lot of embarrassing information about Zarif himself. He says certain very critical things, for example, about the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And there are many people who think that the people who leaked this are, in fact, hardliners within Iran. But Zarif himself has admitted that the recordings are genuine, and that he did say the things that he said in them. So given that that is so, and given that it's embarrassing for him, I can't see realistically how Kerry can deny it. He clearly did blab to Zarif about Israeli operations in Syria and against Iran. I think that is, the evidence that points in that direction is overwhelming. And when he says that he didn't, he's simply not telling the truth. That's the first thing to say. Now, the second thing to say is that, of course, we've always known that Israeli operations are taking place in Syria against Iranian assets there. This has been widely covered by the international media. We've covered it in the Duran ourselves. So in a sense, that is nothing new. And thirdly, and I think Kerry could reasonably point out that this is a secret of, if it is even a secret, of another country, namely Israel. It's not the United States, however closely allied the United States is to Israel. It's not quite the same as if he was blabbing about American secrets. But there is no doubt that he has leaked to Zarif information which, of course, the Israelis probably gave him, in fact, would definitely have given him in confidence. And nonetheless, when talking to no less a person than the foreign minister of Iran, a country with which the United States is an adversarial relationship, you see that here we have a situation where Kerry talks about and blabs, and as you rightly say, he's got history of doing this. He blabs this information to the Iranians, and who knows what the Iranians were able to do with it. Now, I'm going to make a point, and this is something that I remember very well from the early days of Donald Trump's presidency. Donald Trump had a meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in the White House, in the Oval Office, and they discussed certain information about the battle against ISIS. And over the course of it, Trump, who as president is authorized to do so, gave the Russians, Lavrov, certain information, or rather he told them certain things, which the media and the bureaucracy in the United States raised a huge outcry about, saying that this was information which had been provided by Israel to the United States in confidence, and there was talk about Trump leaking this kind of information, and there was even talk about this being grounds for impeaching Trump. I remember all of that. I remember it vividly. By the way, none of that was true, but that's what they said. So what they accused Trump of doing, we now see, and it's been caught on tape, that Kerry has actually done. And it is very interesting to see that, yes, there's a couple of Republicans that are jumping up and down and saying all sorts of things about it. But the Democrats, the media, all those people who went after Trump at that time for, those contacts that he had with Lavrov, which are not based on any reality, by the way, on this question of what Kerry said, they are entirely and completely silent. So what is sauce for the goose, it turns out, is not sauce for the gander. So there we are.
Yeah, big surprise. The Democrats, the left, actually did what they were accusing Trump of doing. They actually did. That's a big surprise. Two questions.
Well, there is a difference. There is a difference. Can I just say about there is a difference, which is, of course, well, there's two differences. Firstly, it was Kerry is a Democrat and was the beloved Obama Secretary of State. So there's that difference. But of course, the other thing is that, of course, Kerry blabbed this information, which is much more concrete information than the information Trump gave to the Russians, which was not concrete information at all. Anyway, Trump supposedly gave the information to the Russians. We hate the Russians. Kerry gave it to the Iranians. And to be straightforward about it, most Democrats don't feel towards Iran anything like what they feel towards Russia. In fact, some of them are even well disposed to Iran. So those are the differences. But if you look at the fundamentals, the two stories, they are essentially the same. The Trump leak and the Kerry leak are the same story. The Kerry leak is real. The Trump leak was not. The way that they've been discussed in the media has been entirely different from each other.
Okay, so Kerry has a history of blabbing. The guy's got a big mouth. We all know that. We also know that the Obama administration and the Biden-Harris administration, I don't want to say they don't like Israel. They don't like Netanyahu. I think that's what it comes down to. They just don't get along with Netanyahu. So we know that as well. We also know that Kerry, most likely, nothing's going to happen to him. I mean, they could have audio, they could have video, they could have 3 different videos. He could have said it on live TV during the halftime of the Super Bowl or the Champions League, and still nothing would happen to Kerry. I mean, we know that. But, okay, so you could speak to that dynamic. And my second question is, what I'm trying to figure out and what really leaves me a little puzzled, which no one is talking about, but we're going to talk about it, is what exactly was Kerry, Obama's, and now I guess you could say the Biden-Harris's foreign policy vis-a-vis Iran and Syria? On the one hand, going back to the Obama years, you have Kerry speaking with people that fund IS, people that want to overthrow Assad, Kerry telling them, we're going to help you, we're going to give you what you want, you guys are going to take on, you guys are going to overthrow Damascus, and we're going to turn Syria, we're going to put a black flag on Syria and turn it into an IS caliphate. We know that. We know he said that. We know he was talking about that. On the flip side, he obviously wants to deal with Iran. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing, but obviously they want to work with Iran to some capacity. They want this JCPOA to go through. They want to trade with Iran, it seems, because the Biden-Harris administration is talking about lifting sanctions against Iran as well. So I'm just trying to figure out what exactly is the game plan. Iran is aligned with Syria, Kerry, and his policy, which is very much the Obama-Biden policy, seems to be destroy Syria, but prop up Iran. Don't give a crap about Netanyahu. What exactly? That doesn't seem very coherent. But what's your take on everything that I see?
Well, it doesn't seem very coherent because it's not coherent. I mean, the Obama administration was absolutely fixated with overthrowing President Assad of Syria. That was his focus and objective. And of course, that meant, in effect, giving a green light to ISIS And of course, the way Kerry justified it, that conversation he had with the people in the United Nations was that this would supposedly force Assad to negotiate, in other words, to give up and leave. And that would have almost certainly resulted in ISIS capturing Damascus and raising the black flag of the caliphate there. And of course, what happened instead was that the Russians stepped in, as Kerry said, and said very regretfully in that conversation. At the same time as they were doing that, trying to, acting in a way which would have facilitated the establishment of an extreme anti-Shia, pathologically anti-Shia, Islamist caliphate in Syria, because that would have been the effect of their policies, whatever the intentions behind them. They were simultaneously trying to negotiate a deal, a JCPOA deal with Iran, and not, by the way, they didn't do a particularly good job of it. I mean, when Trump says that the deal that they did do is full of holes, they're absolutely right. I mean, it limited the Iranian nuclear program for a particular time period, but it did so in a way that gave no guarantees that it would not resume afterwards. And of course, it had all kinds of other provisions, or failed to have all sorts of provisions, which many people in the United States weren't happy with. So at the same time as they were doing one thing in Syria, they were doing the opposite thing with Iran. And in a sense, that's exactly what they're doing now. And you can see why it is so incoherent by going to this particular recording. Because on the one hand, you see Kerry treating Zarif as if, they're great friends and chums, and he's gossiping and he's telling Zarif about all the things the Iranians have been doing, the Israelis have been doing against the Iranians and all that kind of thing. He's confiding things to Zarif at the same time as he's again simultaneously working against the Iranians in Syria. And this is the same man who is now in the current administration. And the current administration has not worked out a policy, a coherent policy in the Middle East. Once again, it seems to be looking or edging towards some sort of deal with Iran. It's at the same time pressing against Syria. It's antagonizing Turkey, which of course it needs if it's going to carry out its successful operation in Syria. And its policies in Iraq are all over the place. So you see all the chaos and muddle and confusion that the Obama administration had in the Middle East, which created havoc and chaos in the Middle East, and which caused American influence in the Middle East to collapse. Only it's been redoubled. It's even greater. And what makes it even worse is that I don't get the impression that the really top people, to the extent that there are any real top people in the Biden-Harris administration, are even very interested in the Middle East. As you rightly said, Biden waited weeks to speak to Netanyahu, and the two men clearly don't like each other. Blinken has hardly shown any interest in the region at all. And in fact, there is no sense of real clarity about what the administration is doing, and it hasn't even really figured out what it's going to do with Iran. So it's a mess.
Yeah, but they do want to deal with Syria. I imagine they haven't forgotten about Syria.
Oh, yeah.
That's my first question. Actually, I also want to ask you, how is Israel going to react to all of this as well? How do you think they're going to react?
Well, they're going to be very angry. I mean, they're going to be absolutely furious because I'm sure this information was given in confidence. And here they see that Kerry is taking the information Israel gives the United States in confidence and is blabbing it to the foreign minister of the country that Israel perceives as its greatest and most dangerous existential enemy. So they're going to be extremely angry about it. And the Republicans are obviously angry and are making political weather out of it. But the things that are going to be said behind the scenes between the Israelis and the Americans, I mean, the language anyway, let me be careful what I say, the language is going to be exceptionally strong. And they may very well decide that in future, whilst this administration remains in office, they're not going to provide the same amount of information to it as they've done to previous administrations in the past about the sort of things they're doing in the Middle East. So that may create, by the way, even more confusion and uncertainty. But you're quite right. If this administration, and indeed the Obama administration, had one single fixed point, and it was its visceral hatred of President Assad and its efforts to remove him. That's about the only thing that they were focused and single-minded about. Everything else in the Middle East basically fell apart. On that one issue, they were obsessive, and they're still obsessive about it now. Except, of course, that because everything else is falling apart, that policy that they're pursuing to Syria cannot work. And partly it's that same fixation with Syria that is causing all the rest of the chaos and trouble everywhere else in the Middle East also. So it's just about the worst foreign policy in the Middle East that you can have. If you wanted to sit down and draw up a piece of paper and said, what is the worst foreign policy the United States could adopt in the Middle East? Well, you would probably get something like the one it has now.
Okay, a final question. Who do you think got this? It's not really a leak, but definitely it's being pushed out there, right? So who do you think's behind it? Do you think Israel's behind it? Do you think Iran may be behind it? Because you did mention that this was embarrassing to Zarif, the recording, but nonetheless, it was put out there. So there must be some sort of game being played. What do you think's behind kind of ramping this controversy up, or who do you think is behind?
I think it is a strong probability that it was hardliners within Iran. I think that the Iranians, this recording, I should say, it's not a recording of Kerry talking to Zarif. It's a recording of Zarif talking to a journalist. But this is a sort of secret discussion. This conversation was almost certainly leaked by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps as part of a power struggle that is taking place in Iran ahead of the new elections, the presidential elections, which are due to take place there. The objective is to discredit people like Zarif, who is seen as a moderate, somebody who wants to save the JCPOA and rebuild relations with the West in order that the hardliners who want to pursue a much more hardline policy can take control. So I think this is done essentially to discredit Zarif. And the major point about this recording is that it has Zarif saying some extremely critical things about the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps and its former commander, the one who was assassinated a year and a bit ago in circumstances that we all know. I'm not going to mention his name because, well, for all sorts of reasons, our friends in YouTube don't like us doing that, but we all know whom I'm talking about. So I think that is probably, almost certainly, who leaked it. Kerry, if you like, is collateral damage.
Oh, wow, what collateral damage that is. He has a
well,
big
there
mouth.
you go.
He really does.
What is it? Well, he does, absolutely. I have no doubt. Zarif is an extremely careful person, and I'm sure this is true. And as I said, Kerry may deny it, but it's the kind of thing he's done in the past, as you rightly say. Zarif has confirmed that the conversation that this recording is true. So I have no doubt at all that Kerry said it. He may deny it, but I have no doubt that it is true.
Okay, let's see how this thing unfolds. Let's see how the Democrats bury this, which they will. All right. Anyway,
I can already answer that question. They won't report it. That's the usual. That's the usual way. We won't be seeing much about it.
This video will get throttled down. And demonetized.
Absolutely, of course.
Okay, that's how they'll bury this news.
All that. Okay. Okay.
The usual
Okay.
tricks. Okay, guys, I'll put a link to the Duran shop, 10% off, in the description box down below. Take care.